There's theories that the other curse tool amps Kamutoge, so maybe it's a wind tool or a water tool. Hey, what's up everybody? It's LeeLos, and today we're talking about why Meguna versus Heian Era Sukuna is obvious. Stay steady in pursuit of your dreams and goals. You're born to win, you're made for greatness, and I definitely believe in you guys. Keep up the great work each and every day. So, Heian Era Sukuna versus Meguna is a battle between Sukuna and, well, Sukuna. So there's multiple different forms to both of these characters, and today we're going to go in detail analyzing their powers and abilities that they display throughout the series to explain overall who's more powerful than who between these two characters. So first off, we'll talk about the 20-finger equivalent of Meguna and talk about who's more likely to win between him and the original Heian Era Sukuna from the actual Heian Era. Then later in the video, we'll compare Meguna to the true form Sukuna that we see at the end of the series. So when talking about the original Heian Era Sukuna from the actual Heian Era and comparing him to Meguna, there's a few differences that these characters have that gives them both unique advantages. Starting with Heian Era Sukuna, he's somewhere in the range of around 6'5" to 7 feet tall, and he's canonically jacked. In general, he has more muscle than Meguna has. The strength of your body increases the strength of your cursed energy reinforcement, meaning it improves your overall stats and hand-to-hand. So in terms of raw cursed energy reinforcement, the original Heian Era Sukuna would have an advantage against Meguna. The amount of an advantage, however, is debatable, as there's a few more factors that we'll get into later in the video, but it should be noted that we see Yuta fight against Ryu, someone that's not only taller and has more muscle than Yuta, but he's also stated to have more cursed energy output than Yuta as well. Despite this, Yuta's still able to hold his own in hand-to-hand against Ryu. There are some debates that total cursed energy capacity plays a role in raw defense as well, which is helping Yuta to hold his own against Ryu, but it should be noted that Ryu stated to have even more durability than Shinjuku Yuta. So overall, you'd expect him to kind of be crushing Yuta in hand-to-hand, but Yuta's still able to hold his own. So that should be considered, even though being tall and strong is an advantage in hand-to-hand. It might not be quite as big of an amp as many people think it is. The scene that hypes up cursed energy reinforcement the most is Gojo's conversation with Miguel, in which some translations state that if they were to compete with just cursed energy reinforcement, Gojo would be superior in linear movement, but Miguel would be superior in point movement. And then there's other translations that say if they were to fight bare knuckle using just cursed energy reinforcement, Miguel would have the advantage at first, but Gojo would win long term. And then there's a debate over which of these two translations is actually better and what this scene is really trying to say. Also, there's some people who just think Gojo's just lying to Miguel and like that Gojo's just exaggerating because he says Miguel would probably win in point movement. He doesn't say it's 100% for sure. So this scene has a lot of debate around it, but this is the scene that's used to hype up cursed energy reinforcement the most. Now, regarding original Heian Era Sukuna in hand-to-hand versus Meguna in hand-to-hand combat, there are many other factors to consider that might make their hand-to-hand closer than you'd initially think. First off, there's domain amplification, and there's a real possibility that the original Heian Era Sukuna would not have domain amplification. Domain amplification, it neutralizes curse techniques, and it considerably increases the defense of a character. This is proven when Jogo fights against Gojo, and he states the only reason he survived a pure cursed energy attack against Gojo not using his curse technique was because he was using domain amplification. The databooks state that domain amplification is expanding one's domain over their body, so there's an argument that domain amplification might give you a buff to your overall stats, similar to how domains give a buff to your overall stats. There's a couple reasons why the original Heian Era Sukuna might not have domain amplification. Domain amplification is introduced in concept as a more advanced version of simple domain, and simple domain was introduced in the Heian Era as a technique for the weak. It was for people who did not have domains to protect themselves against people who did have domains. Considering Heian Era Sukuna was extremely powerful and instead of simple domain displays hollow wicker basket, there's a real possibility that he did not have have simple domain, therefore would not develop the evolution or branching version, the domain amplification, back in the original Heian era. There's a couple other theories, one being that domain amplification might be a brand new technique from the modern era. There's a scene in which Mechamaru's fighting Mahito, and he essentially makes a fake version of domain amplification. He does this by trapping simple domain in a tube, and he's able to hit Mahito's soul with it, essentially negating Mahito's curse technique. When Kenjaku's witnessing this fight, at first he doesn't know what Mechamaru's doing. Then after analyzing the technique, he realizes that Mechamaru's using simple domain, and he has internal monologue where he says that using this technique, even Gojo could not avoid being hit. This scene of trapping simple domain in a container could be the inspiration that led Kenjaku to inventing domain amplification right after this fight. Then, during the 10 days in between this fight and Shibuya, Kenjaku taught domain amplification to the disaster curses. This is a possible theory, with the only counter being, how would Angel then have any information on domain amplification after this? She might have witnessed domain amplification the same way Yuta did, because Yuta says he saw the disaster curses use domain amplification by watching Mechamaru's film. So maybe Angel did the same thing. If so, this theory becomes pretty strong. There's a possibility that Heian Era Sukuna would not have domain amplification. If Meguna is fighting Heian Era Sukuna in hand-to-hand, the initial advantages that Heian Era Sukuna has might be negated by domain amplification on its own. Furthermore, Heian Era Sukuna would not just be boxing Meguna by himself, he would also be boxing the 10 Shadows. The 10 Shadows being creatures that Sukuna can further augment and increase their strength with his own cursed energy. Some of the 10 Shadows being massively underrated. For example, Agito got hit directly by a black flash from Gojo and immediately regenerated from it. Agito genuinely might be a character similar to Maharaga, in which you need to completely decimate Agito in one attack in order to kill Agito. And Agito has healing properties that can be used to heal Sukuna during the fight as well, and Sukuna can use the abilities of the 10 Shadows without summoning them. But it should be noted, it's heavily implied that Meguna cannot use domain amplification and summon other 10 Shadows other than the Maharaga wheel at the same time. Sukuna would either have to choose to use the 10 Shadows, all of the 10 Shadow Shikigami, or he would have to choose to use domain amplification. Either option would give him a chance at least being relative in hand-to-hand to Heian Era Sukuna, so that he's not getting completely overwhelmed. He would at least be able to hold his own. Heian Era Sukuna also has Kamutoke and an unknown curse tool. To this day, we have no idea what it does. There's theories that the other curse tool amps Kamutoke, so maybe it's a wind tool or a water tool. Kamutoke would really only be effective against Meguna Shikigami. The odds of Meguna not being able to dodge Kamutoke is very low, because we see a massively nerfed Sukuna is able to casually react to lightning attacks from mythical beast Amber Kashimo, and his Shikigami Agito is fused with Nue, a being that has lightning anyway, so Kamutoke might not even work on Agito. And as we said before, the other curse tool is completely unknown what it does. We actually have zero information on it. So all that being said, how would a fight go between Meguna and the original Heian Era Sukuna? So if the original Heian Era Sukuna jumped in a time machine and decided to fight Meguna, basically taking Gojo's place and fighting Meguna the way that Gojo did, the reality is, in character, Meguna wins pretty much 100% of the time, and it wouldn't even be close to a challenging fight. The reason is, Meguna had a month before the fight. In character, before the fight starts, Meguna's just going to fully adapt Maharaga to Heian Era Sukuna's entire kit. In complete honesty, if you analyze the Gojo versus Meguna fight, you can make an argument that Sukuna's preparation for Gojo began when he first fought Maharaga back in Shibuya as a way to keep Megumi alive, not to mention the elaborate binding vow plan he crafted with Yuji, learning the weakness to Gojo's domain expansion. There was a plethora of things Sukuna did before that fight even began that spanned over 100 chapters worth of time, but as many have said, sorcery fights are not fair. That's just the way it goes in Jujutsu Kaisen. At the end of the day, it's just Meguna using his abilities, right? If you give Meguna even 1% of the prep time that he had against Gojo, then Heian Era Sukuna gets absolutely low diffed. Forget about giving Meguna an entire month or 100 chapters. Give Meguna 10 minutes before the fight starts. Maharaga will be fully adapted to cleave, dismantle, and fuga. Let him rest another 5 minutes so his curse technique's replenished, and then begin the fight. If you want to make it completely even, let Heian Era Sukuna do soul swap training with Yuta for a month straight. That should get him properly prepared. So That way it's completely 1-to-1 even. Heian Era Sukuna would get brutally, absolutely low diffed. He would have a Maharaga who's fully adapted to his entire kit. His only way of being able to damage Maharaga would be Kamutoke, and if Kamutoke doesn't one-shot Maharaga, then Maharaga would adapt to that as well. Now, putting that aside, what would happen if they fought each other with no prep time at all? This would be a closer battle, but the reality is Meguna would still overall be slightly more likely to win. And hints of this are shown throughout Sukuna's first fight with Maharaga. In Shibuya, Maharaga adapted to dismantle almost instantly. It's debatable, but you could argue that he adapted to dismantle after just one attack. By the end of the domain expansion, Maharaga was nearly already adapted to slashes in general. This implies that simple techniques like cleave and dismantle, Maharaga is able to adapt to them a lot faster than complex techniques like unlimited void. He adapts to dismantle and nearly all slashes in general within moments of fighting Sukuna. If Meguna were to fight Heian Era Sukuna, Maharaga legitimately might be fully adapted to cleave and dismantle, and maybe even all slashes in general, after just one domain clash with Heian Era Sukuna. Meguna was able to domain clash with Gojo while using Megami Soul to tank the unlimited void sure hit attacks. If the same thing is possible against Heian Era Sukuna, then Maharaga would likely be adapted to dismantle, cleave, and maybe even all slashes in general within minutes of their first domain clash, because we know that Maharaga's adaptation increases in speed if he continues taking damage. In that case, all Meguna has to do is at most survive a few minutes using Agito and the other 10 shadows to make up for the gap in hand-to-hand combat, and once Maharaga's fully adapted to cleave and dismantle, victory is almost guaranteed. It should also be noted that the Maharaga that Sukuna summons is implied to be considerably more powerful than the Maharaga in Shibuya. We see it perform some insane feats. It blocks Black Flash punches from Gojo like they're nothing, so its overall stats are really crazy, and its world-cutting slash that Maharaga has honestly might even be better than Sukuna's, because Maharaga can fire world-cutting slash without any hand signs or chance. He can basically just instant fire a world-cutting slash, and in character, Sukuna likes to see what his opponents are capable of, so he legit might just get chopped in half. Just looking at the Maharaga, seeing what he can do and just get chopped in half, that's a real possibility. This adaptation strategy could backfire on Meguna, however. For example, maybe for some reason, if Megami Soul is being used to take the burden of the adaptation for Heian Era Sukuna sure hit attacks, if that like just kills Megami, then the plan would backfire terribly, and then Meguna would just lose. So it's either the plan would work fantastically and he has a high probability of beating Heian Era Sukuna, or the plan backfires terribly and he loses right away, like Megami just dies right away from the slashes. Without the plan of adapting, it would be a very high difficulty fight that could go either way. Sukuna's Maharaga might be strong enough to survive a dismantle, and Sukuna fighting in character probably wouldn't want to kill Maharaga in the first attack anyway, so they still might end up in a situation where Maharaga ends up fully adapted to cleave and dismantle, even if the soul adapting strategy doesn't work the way that it worked against Gojo, and Sukuna in character legit might just get chopped in half by Maharaga's world-cutting slash by standing there and wanting to see what Maharaga can do. So there's still possibilities for Meguna winning, but if the soul adapting strategy doesn't work, then the fight becomes more of a 50-50. It's, can Sukuna's stronger hand-to-hand make up for the difference of the 10 shadows before Maharaga becomes fully adapted, or will he just let his guard down and in character get chopped by a world-cutting slash? The general consensus is outside of a domain battle, Meguna is the stronger character, but inside of a domain battle, Heian Era Sukuna would be the stronger character. So it really could go either way. If the Megami soul adapting strategy doesn't work, it could really go either way. But Meguna would be slightly more likely to win because he has more tools in his toolkit. Not only that, he's canonically older and slightly more experienced than Heian Era Sukuna actually is, so the odds of him getting outsmarted are pretty much zero. There's a slight advantage in Meguna's favor. Not to mention, if Meguna's ever actually at a disadvantage, he can just transform into the true form Heian Era Sukuna himself and just win. So like, it's always going to be slightly more likely that Meguna would win against the original Heian Era Sukuna if the original Heian Era Sukuna hopped in a time machine to go fight him. Now, there's a few Sukuna arguments that people really don't like, but I'm just gonna go ahead and mention them anyway. And then we're gonna talk about Meguna versus true form Heian Era Sukuna. So people really don't like this one, but there is an argument that Meguna would have an advantage in domain clashes and might just have more cursed energy than the original Heian Era Sukuna. People really don't like this one, but the argument is Meguna might have more cursed energy than the original Heian Era Sukuna because he literally has all of Heian Era Sukuna's cursed energy, and he might have Megumi's cursed energy on top of it. He does have access to Megumi's curse technique, and he's using Megumi's body, so he might also just have access to Megumi's cursed energy pool on top of his own, which isn't much. It might not even be worth one Sukuna finger, but it would essentially make Meguna like a 20.5 finger Sukuna compared to the original Heian Era Sukuna. So in theory, Meguna would have slightly more cursed energy than the original Heian Era Sukuna would. And when Gojo's explaining how domain battles work, he states that amount of cursed energy has an effect in domain battles, so Meguna might have a slight advantage due to that. And another one, the argument that a lot of people really dislike is the possibility that the cursed fingers might have gotten stronger over 1,000 years. People really dislike this argument because it basically means that the original Heian Era Sukuna would be a lot weaker than Gojo. This is the actual true reason why people dislike this argument. It's just a fact. Pretty much the only people who complain about this argument are the people who really want original Heian Era Sukuna to be stronger than Gojo. From what I've seen, for the most part, no one else really complains about it, but let's talk about it real quick. So honestly, there's like 3 different arguments for why this is a possibility. When Megumi fights a cursed finger bearer, he states that all of Sukuna's fingers are resonating, and immediately after that, he says that this cursed finger bearer is stronger, much stronger than the first one he fought, implying that Sukuna's fingers resonating is making this cursed finger bearer stronger as a result. This implies that the fingers resonating are causing them to grow in power to some degree. Another argument is Gojo at the start of the series trying to destroy one of Sukuna's cursed fingers and then saying, "You can't destroy them, it's that powerful of a curse. With each passing day, they get even stronger." If you just take that literally, that would imply that every day the cursed fingers are getting stronger. And if you highball it, you could say that over 1,000 years, the fingers have been getting stronger for 1,000 years. This would make Sukuna considerably more powerful in the modern era than he was in the original Heian era. People really don't like this idea, as I said before. The counter argument people say is no, it just means the seals are getting weaker. That's why the fingers are getting stronger. But if you look at this scene, Gojo's holding an unsealed finger in this scene. It's not even a sealed finger that he's talking about. That argument isn't as strong as some people think it is. Both things can be true. The seals can be getting weaker and the fingers can be getting stronger at the same time. Then the second counter argument people bring up is they'll say, oh, he's just referring to the curse that makes the fingers indestructible. That curse is getting stronger every day. So let's go with that argument. Let's say he's just referring to the fingers are getting more indestructible every day. First off, you'd think, why does that matter? If they're already indestructible, why would he even mention that they're getting more indestructible? Why even say that? That's one thing. The other thing, I'd like you in the comments to explain to me, how is it possible for a curse to get stronger without growing in cursed energy? I'd like you to go ahead and explain that in the comments. So even with that argument, it would result in the fingers gaining more cursed energy over time. The idea that backs up that maybe the fingers really did get stronger over all this time is the fact that when Meguna is at 16 fingers, nobody from the original Heian era says that 15 or 16 finger Sukuna is any weaker in any way at all. And Yorozu doesn't say that. Uro doesn't say that either. Yorozu specifically is a really big deal. For example, Yorozu was in love with Heian Era Sukuna specifically for his power. But when Yorozu meets 16 finger Meguna, she doesn't say anything about him being weaker at all. No mention of it by any means. You would think that would be something she'd mention since she was in love with his strength back in the original Heian era. So if you use any of those arguments, then yeah, Meguna would kind of destroy the original Heian Era Sukuna. Oh, and also, Meguna can replenish his curse technique with reverse curse technique. If he can survive a full domain expansion battle, he might be able to just sneak Heian Era Sukuna by immediately replenishing his curse technique with his reverse curse technique, and then just cooking him with his domain. Let's talk about Meguna versus the true form version of Heian Era Sukuna. Now we're going to use hypothetical strongest versions of these characters. You have Meguna, who's full health. He has a World Cutting Slash. He hasn't done the Binding Vows yet. That essentially nerfs World Cutting Slash. And then you have the Heian Era Sukuna, who has World Cutting Slash with the hand signs and chants, and he has Kamutoke, and they're both at full health. Meguna also has his Maharaga with the World Cutting Slash, and you have these guys fighting. The debate basically comes down to, what do you think is a bigger advantage? Sukuna being physically stronger and having 2 additional arms plus Kamutoke, or Meguna having the entirety of the 10 shadows and a Maharaga with World Cutting Slash. Outside of the domain, the 10 shadows plus Maharaga would just be the bigger advantage, but inside the domain, Heian Era Sukuna having more physical strength would be a bigger advantage. And seeing how they both have domain amplification, Meguna doesn't have a domain amplification advantage anymore, so Heian Era Sukuna would just be objectively stronger in the hand-to-hand inside the domain. Essentially, Meguna's only real win condition would be landing World Cutting Slash, and he actually would have a chance of doing this. If we're using a hypothetical strongest version of Meguna, then he could fire a World Cutting Slash with no hand signs one singular time, and jumping with the 10 shadows while aiming for that one specific goal, there's a real chance of him actually being able to land that on Heian Era Sukuna. Meanwhile, Heian Era Sukuna's win condition would just be overpowering Meguna in a domain clash and then killing him with this domain. Also, Maharaga's World Cutting Slash could also kill Sukuna, so this would be an extremely close fight because Meguna can jump Heian Era Sukuna with all the 10 shadows, and Sukuna has to deal with 2 World Cutting Slashes that can both essentially instant fire. Maharaga has a near instant fire World Cutting Slash, and Meguna also has one. All Meguna has to do is land that attack. Meanwhile, Heian Era Sukuna needs to overwhelm and wipe Meguna out quickly before Meguna or Maharaga could land this attack even a single time. And considering that Meguna can hide in the shadows and use swarms of the different 10 shadows to hide where he's at, they both have valid win conditions. It really comes down to what's more likely to happen. Most of the 10 shadows don't really stand a chance against true form Heian Era Sukuna, but Agito might be able to survive some attacks other than cleave or World Cutting Slash. But then again, Meguna's not going to just let him cleave or World Cutting Slash Agito. He does have the instant fire World Cutting Slash he can fire at any moment. Essentially, if Heian Era Sukuna takes his focus away from Meguna for even a moment, Meguna would just win the fight with the World Cutting Slash. And if he even tries to fire a World Cutting Slash of his own, Meguna would probably fire his own and just kill him with his faster World Cutting Slash that doesn't require hand signs or chants. So overall, this is a 50-50, but I'd say it's slightly more likely for Meguna to win. His win conditions are just easier to achieve. Meanwhile, Heian Era Sukuna's win conditions involve more risk. Essentially, anything that would give him a winning scenario also puts him at risk of getting hit with a World Cutting Slash. So even though Heian Era Sukuna is physically more powerful, has more destructive power, Meguna has better hacks and would be slightly more likely to win. And also, like if Meguna's ever in trouble, he could just go into true form too and win. But that's everything I wanted to say. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate the views in the comments. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.